Well, now that you saw a general statement of whale watching as platforms of opportunities, you're going to have a very specific example of how this all works. Dr. Daniela Maldini is the Chief Scientist at Pacific Whale Foundation, and she's going to present an overview of the scientific knowledge on whale strikes, a perspective on the potential factors that contribute to their occurrence, and current gaps in the knowledge. You see, we have a high-quality problem here on Maui. We got a lot of whales. And the more whales you have, the greater probability you have of encounters or strikes. Danielle is going to share some of the preliminary findings of an ongoing study on boat whale interactions in Maui County waters. She has led long-term dolphin research projects on bottlenose dolphins and sea otters in Monterey Bay, and odontocetes abundance and distribution in Hawaii, and transient killer whale ecology in Alaska as a research associate at the Alaska Sea Life Center. Before she joined Pacific Whale Foundation, she was a director of research at the Earthwatch Institute. At Pacific Whale Foundation, she leads a number of scientific studies, including the Foundation's work to prevent vessel whale collisions in Hawaii by analyzing surprise encounters and vessel near misses. Please welcome Dr. Maldini.
Aloha ahi ahi kako. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining me. It's a little late, but I'll try to hopefully not bring you down with the last talk. We've heard a lot about good stuff with whales. Unfortunately, a lot of what I have to share might not be so happy. So it could happen like this. And this is a photo that was taken in Table Bay, South Africa in July 2010. And a whale hit a boat. But that's not how it normally happens. Normally, boats hit whales, and that's what most of my talk is going to be about. So it is well documented that the number of vessels on the water worldwide is increasing. And in size, in number, and in speed to keep pace with the waterborne commercial activities and also industrial, other recreational activities and industrial activities. The number of commercial vessels that are engaged in maritime commerce has tripled in the last 50 years and continues to grow as global freight transport becomes, has a projected growth of 4% through at least 2020. And in this figure, it represents only world trade of cargo ships throughout the world in 1 year, the year 2007. And in yellow, those routes have been used for that year over 5,000 times. That kind of gives you an idea of how much traffic there is. Also, the US cruise ship traffic has increased, as well as other fleets around the world, at an average growth rate of 7.2% since 1990. And some of the most popular routes are the Caribbean, for example, the Bahamas, Alaska. But many more routes are being sought by cruise ship liners, and this traffic is expected to increase. I won't belabor on the massive growth of the whale watching industry in the past decade, but also many more countries are engaging in this activity, and so the number of vessels on the water is increasing. In Hawaii, interestingly enough, the increase has not been quite as large in the past 10 years as it has been in other parts of the world. So what we know from this is that all cetaceans, especially large whales, are vulnerable to collision with vessels. And there has been several reports that provide some evidence of which species are being affected. And this is just one of the many reports that exist out there and represents the worldwide number of large whales that has been struck by vessels or reported struck by vessels between 1960 and 2002. In the white bars represent the total number of animals that have been struck, which is not a very useful number. The one in black, the bars in black, represents the proportion of animals struck per capita per year based on the known population size. This is a much more useful number because it gives you an idea of the problem, of which species are more at risk based on this data. And as you can see, there's some very prominent bars. For example, NAR, which is the North Atlantic right whale, SR, the southern right whale, blue whales, humpback whales, and most whales are affected. And I'm going to go through some of what we know about some of these populations to give you an idea of the issue. With only 400 in existence, the North Atlantic right whales are among the most endangered in the world, and vessel strikes are probably the primary challenge for their recovery. North Atlantic right whales migrate between feeding grounds in the Gulf of Maine and their winter calving areas off Georgia and Florida, an ocean area which is very heavy with shipping traffic, as you saw in the first slide that I showed. Between 1970 and 2006, approximately 37% of all recorded North Atlantic right whale deaths were attributed to collisions. And it is possible that these figures are actually an underestimate of the actual ship strike mortality rates, since some of the whales struck offshore are not generally reported, and so mortalities may be much higher. Other populations of concern, as we said, is the southern right whale, which numbers approximately 10,000 animals spread throughout the southern part of the southern hemisphere. And also for this population, ship strikes are a big concern. Even more concerning, and I didn't mention it before and it wasn't in that graph, is the situation of the northern Pacific right whale, that it's now extremely rare and endangered. There's a Northeast Pacific subpopulation which summers in the southeastern Bering Sea and Gulf of Alaska, which may have no more than 50 animals left to that population. And the western subpopulation in the Sea of Okhotsk, between basically the Kuril Islands and Sakhalin Island in Russia, may number only about in the low hundreds. So these are very, very deep concerns for these populations. Another prominent population here is the right whales. There are only two surviving, the gray whale, two surviving gray whale populations in the world, the eastern and the western. Both these populations were historically hunted almost to extinction through commercial whaling. And the Eastern Pacific population, which migrates between Mexico and Alaska, has recovered and now numbers about 20,000 individuals. The Western population, which is believed to migrate between China and Russia, only numbers probably 100 animals or so. And there may be only about 30 to 35 reproductive females in this population. So what are some of the most common injuries that we see on whales struck by boats? A very common photograph that you see for all species of large whales is the large propeller wounds that are left to the survivors. But many carcasses are found also that way. So we can observe broken bones, hemorrhaging, which leads to death oftentimes, other evidence of blunt trauma, and severe propeller cuts. So this is pretty horrifying. It's a gray whale. And estimating the risks to a whale from the presence of a vessel in an area is really an ongoing challenge, as there are so many factors at play in determining what the risk is. For example, day versus night, weather conditions and visibility, number of whales present in a particular area, the size of the ship that interacts with the whale, the build of the ship and its acoustic environment, which may attract the whale, the level of expertise of the captains in reading whale behavior or in commencing maneuvers to avoid collision, and many other factors which may not even have thought about. For the most part, there is very little information on the circumstances of these strikes. Much of the data that I showed you initially has been collected based on reports that were not complete or based on carcasses that were found ashore. And so there's not always information about the type of boat or the circumstances around a particular event. And also, most of the information that we currently have, where we do know the circumstances, pertains to large ships, such as cargo ships or cruise liners. And so I will review some of the results of some studies on this particular issue based on large ships, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what we don't know. So the first study I will mention took place in Alaska, and in particular in Glacier Bay National Park, which is an area of intense humpback whale feeding as well as heavy cruise ship traffic. So the U.S. National Park Service in this area limits the number of entries and speed of the cruise ships to